Here at Napopo, the damage is extensive. See the greenhouse behind me here? It has a sign on it saying that that is unsafe. Department of Public Works has been going through and tagging all of these buildings. That White House got pushed back up onto the greenhouse. These homes here completely destroyed. There's structural damage, plumbing, electric. These houses have been swept off their foundations. And right there where those two cars are parked, that is where the blue house used to be. And guess where it ended up? In the bay. Aloha, my name is Malika Dudley. As a television reporter and meteorologist, I've reported on tsunami events and covered the aftermath of tsunamis both here in Hawaii and abroad. Today, I'd like to welcome you to the Pacific Tsunami Museum. Mahalo for visiting. By coming here today, you are helping us to fulfill our mission that, through education and awareness, we believe that no one should die due to a tsunami. The goals of the museum are to promote public tsunami education and to preserve history. The museum serves as a living memorial to those who lost their lives in past tsunami events. Let us not forget, and what you learn here today will help keep you and your family safe should you be in a coastal area anywhere in the world when a tsunami strikes. Why is the Pacific Tsunami Museum located here in Hilo? Well, Hilo is the city in all of the Hawaiian Islands that has been most affected by past tsunamis. It's also one of the most frequently impacted anywhere in the Pacific or even the world. Hilo has a very interesting history, from the time of the ancient Hawaiians through the days of whaling, sugar plantations, the first railways, and today as a destination for visitors from around the world. Much of that history has been affected by tsunamis. On April 2nd, 1868, the largest earthquake in Hawaii's recorded history, a magnitude of 7.9, struck the southern part of the island of Hawaii, generating tsunami waves that destroyed virtually every village along the southern coast. Tsunamis from Chile, Japan, and even eastern Russia would strike Hawaii in 1877, 1896, and in 1923. But they would be quickly forgotten with the horrors of the Second World War. Just as the islands were recovering from the trauma of World War II, another devastating tsunami would again strike Hawaii. On April 1st, 1946, following a great earthquake in the Aleutian Islands, the most disastrous tsunami yet recorded would kill 159 people across the Hawaiian Islands. This event showed that none of our islands are safe from tsunamis. Hilo was especially hard hit, with nearly every building along the bayfront destroyed. I'm now standing at the Tsunami Memorial for the Japanese immigrant village of Shinmachi, or Newtown. 96 lives were lost in Hilo that day. And here I am at Coconut Island, where the museum has placed signs on a coconut tree, indicating how high the water rose in various tsunami events. Farther down the coast, in an area called Keaukaha, 6-year-old Jeannie Johnston and her little brother, David, had just woken up after spending the night with their grandparents, when Jeannie noticed water from the first wave flooding the yard. Moments later, Jeannie's uncle took this remarkable photo as the family fled inland just ahead of the surging tsunami waves. Jeannie has never forgotten that horrifying experience as they fled from the waves. This experience led Jeannie to ultimately be a founder of our museum and to become a natural hazard expert.
My mother said that my brother and I had nightmares for months after that we wake up screaming and it's quite vivid.
Along the Hamakua coast, some of the most tragic deaths occurred at the school on the small peninsula of Laupahoehoe. This is the memorial for the students, teachers, and families whose lives were lost as the 1946 tsunami washed completely across this peninsula. But there were also amazing rescues. Those stories are shared right here, among them the story of a teacher at Laupahoehoe School. Marsu McGinnis was in her seaside cottage with 3 other teachers when the tsunami struck.
and awakened by a knock on the door. Come see the tidal wave. Come see the tidal wave. And so we came out. We were in our pajamas and robes and everything, and said, "Tidal wave." And we looked down, and lo and behold, the water did suck out. Something like emptying a bathtub. And then the water came in very slowly, like filling a bathtub. That's a tidal wave? Huh, I don't believe that. What do they mean, tidal wave? So we turned around to go back in, and they said, "It's doing it again." And this time, it sucked out, much further, and it came back in much higher and washed up some naupaka plants and things that were there. But it even washed up some fish onto this field and everything. And the kids were out, trying to catch the fish. And of course, it started to come in, and it got bigger and bigger. It just kept getting bigger. And that was the first time that anybody had thought to be afraid. And then the window glass broke, and the whole cottage just collapsed. It was crushed. And I was hanging on to the roof, and so was Faye. I remember Helen Kingseed was right beside me, and I put my arm under hers, but she was just swooshed right out. I never saw her again. And so then, almost as fast as we were washed in, we were washed out. And we clung to the comb of the roof. And I remember when the roof was going out, I saw Dorothy Drake clinging onto the corner of the roof. Never saw her again. Never saw Helen again. And Faye and I were kind of holding hands and making our way. And then, of course, I never saw Faye again. When I finally came up, I looked around. I was surrounded by rubbish, parts of boards, and I clung onto this several boards that were still nailed together and kind of paddled around it. And then pretty soon along came a door, floating a door, and I got onto that and let my other rubbish go. And it was pretty good. The boat came, Dr. Fernandes' boat came out. And there I was saved.
Marsu's cottage mates were all lost to the sea, but she somehow managed to cling to floating debris and was rescued later that day by a local doctor who had gone out to sea on a small boat looking for survivors. Kazu Murakami was a 15-year-old student at the school that fateful day and was washed out to sea by the tsunami. Fortunately, a Navy seaplane had spotted Kazu and dropped him a life raft. But even in the raft, he was being washed out to sea. Lucky for Kazu that a Navy landing craft had left Pearl Harbor before the tsunami and was diverted past the Big Island to look for survivors. They spotted Kazu, and seaman David Cook volunteered to go down the cargo net and pulled him from the sea. They would be reunited over 50 years later at a ceremony right here at the museum. Now you know why the museum is located in Hilo, but just why is Hilo so vulnerable to tsunamis? Hilo Bay is shaped a bit like a funnel, aimed toward Alaska, where tsunamis in 1946, 1957, and 1964 were generated. But Hilo has also been heavily impacted by tsunamis from Chile in the Southeast Pacific. In 1946, the third wave turned out to be the largest in Hilo Bay. Here you see it surging up the Wailuku River. But in other areas of the islands, each of the first 8 waves was the largest somewhere because of the Seiche effect and the complex nature of tsunami waves wrapping around the islands. The lessons to take away from all of this are that there is always more than just one tsunami wave, and any of the waves could be the biggest,
depending on where you are. Also, the danger can last for several hours. Sadly, many people haven't learned these lessons. Following the devastating 1946 tsunami, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center was established. It is now located at Pearl Harbor, just outside Honolulu. The Warning Center monitors earthquakes and tsunamis across the Pacific. Basically, whenever a large, shallow earthquake occurs under or near the ocean, a tsunami watch goes into effect. At this stage, the Warning Center notifies emergency management agencies of the possibility of a tsunami. Until the 1990s, the system could not confirm that a tsunami had actually been generated until it came ashore somewhere near the epicenter of the earthquake. This resulted in a critical loss of time, and the impact of a tsunami onshore in one place didn't always accurately reflect just how big the tsunami really might be. The system was then improved with the deployment of tsunami gauges on the seafloor in the Pacific Ocean. The very first gauge, the prototype which proved the concept, is right here in the museum. Basically, this is how it works. It sits on the ocean bottom and measures the height of waves passing above it. This information is transmitted to a surface buoy that then relays it to a satellite and down to the warning center. So, when you hear a tsunami warning announced over the media or hear the siren sound, know that it is not a false alarm. An actual tsunami has been confirmed to be on its way. Only 4 years after the warning system was first implemented, a tsunami struck Hawaii in 1952. This time coming from the Kamchatka Peninsula in the Northwest Pacific. Hilo Bay would record the largest waves of anywhere in the Hawaiian Islands, proving that Hilo was especially vulnerable, not only to Aleutian tsunamis, but even to those from the Pacific coast of Russia. In 1957, another tsunami struck the islands. This one was generated off Alaska. But unlike the 1946 tsunami, the 1957 tsunami would wreak the most vengeance on the island of Kauai, where it was actually bigger there than the 1946 tsunami. The villages of Ha'ena, Wainiha, and Kalihiwai were virtually wiped out as the waves surged ashore on Kauai. Many villages would be isolated for days because the bridges and roads connecting them to the rest of the island were destroyed. Even the island of Molokai was impacted, as explained by Anakala Pilipo Salatorio.
And they noticed that the ocean was receding a long ways. And they started running to the church, some rang the bell and yelling out to the husbands, kai e, kai e, kai e. And so that meaning tsunami or big wave or tidal wave. And also yelling to the husbands, don't forget the children. Then we saw the ocean coming in and it just covered the whole valley. We saw the waves coming in and just one big solid wave and just picked up the houses and everything that was in a low area. And we see it float all the way up into the valley. And the most frightening experience for me, even till today, is when I tell a story, I can, don't mind me, that I can still see it and still hear it, watching them floating and then watching it going back out with all boulders rolling, banging, all the cracking sound, and then it all disappeared and nothing was left.
This clearly demonstrates that no two tsunamis are the same, even if they come from near the same source area. The warning system had worked, and there was no loss of life in either of these destructive tsunamis. But there was, as yet, no buoy system, and there had been several other warnings with only small tsunamis coming ashore. The public, unfortunately, saw these as false alarms, and not as lucky near misses. Sadly, the stage was now set for yet another tsunami tragedy in Hilo. On May 22, 1960, the largest earthquake ever recorded by modern instruments, a colossal 9.5 in magnitude, struck off the coast of Chile. A tsunami warning was issued forecasting the waves to arrive in Hawaii around midnight. Thinking this was an exciting event to watch, two teenage brothers, Richard and Bernard Waltgen, told their parents they were going to visit friends and snuck down to the bay to watch. They narrowly survived. Never go watch a tsunami. June Shigimasa and her family ignored the warning because of all the so-called false alarms and because of their small child and the late hour. The story of their survival is incredible. Remember, there is no such thing as a false alarm for a tsunami. And Mrs. Fusayo Ito thought that the danger was over and settled in for the night. She was washed out to sea clinging to a window frame. Mrs. Ito was incredibly lucky to survive, but 61 people died that night. And the damage to Hilo was horrific. So please remember, a tsunami has multiple waves and the danger can last for hours. And don't ever get into a car to try to outrun a tsunami. It would only be 4 years before the next major tsunami would strike. That tsunami was generated by the 1964 Good Friday earthquake in Alaska. The combined death toll from the earthquake was 131 lives lost, 115 in Alaska, 4 in Oregon, and 12 in California. But of the 131 deaths, only 9 died in the earthquake itself. The rest, a staggering 122, were victims of tsunami waves. The terrible death toll revealed a major weakness in the warning system. Of the 122 fatalities, 82 were caused by local tsunamis. Tsunami waves created by local landslides. Tsunami waves that arrived on shore in mere minutes, as you can see in this computer simulation, allowing no time for the warning system to respond. As you've already seen, Hawaii also has large destructive local tsunamis, such as the one that occurred in 1868. We're lucky that such events have been rare, but on Thanksgiving weekend 1975, a large earthquake struck just off the south coast of this island. Our local Boy Scout troop had a tradition of hiking down through Hawaii Volcanoes National Park to camp at a lovely cove called Halape. Here you see the scouts on their way down the trail. This is what the camping area in the grove of palm trees looked like before the earthquake and tsunami. And here's what it looked like after the event. The scoutmaster and a local fisherman were killed. Miraculously, all of the scouts survived. But once again, there was simply no time for the warning system to respond. A locally generated tsunami would progress through the islands in mere minutes. So what's the solution? What can we do? If you are near the ocean and feel an earthquake that's big enough and long enough to really shake you, maybe knock you off your feet, then evacuate immediately. Literally, head for the hills. And of course, if you hear a siren sound, evacuate. It's much better if you are aware of the tsunami hazard zones, so you know the closest safe place to evacuate to. Go online to our website and see if your lodging is in a tsunami hazard zone and where the closest safe area is. And share this knowledge with your friends and loved ones. The term tsunami is a Japanese word, tsu meaning harbor and nami meaning wave. But few people were actually familiar with the term until the end of 2004. The Indian Ocean tsunami changed all that. That tsunami was generated by a 9.1 earthquake off the coast of Indonesia and spread all across the Indian Ocean, causing death and destruction in countries including Indonesia, Thailand, India, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and even as far away as Kenya and South Africa. The official death toll is a staggering 280,000 lives lost. but many people are still listed as missing or unaccounted for, bringing the probable death toll as high as 300,000 or more. So many people were killed because everyone was taken by surprise. At that time, no tsunami warning system was in place for the Indian Ocean. In the 2004 tsunami exhibit, you can see remarkable videos of the waves striking Indonesia, Thailand, India, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives, as well as hear incredible tales of survival and tragic stories of loss. This event sensitized the world to the danger from tsunamis. The Pacific warning system was expanded, and warning systems were created for the Indian Ocean, even the Caribbean Sea. The next major tsunami struck in the Central Pacific in 2009. Countless lives were saved because areas such as American Samoa had evacuation plans and training.
You know, they had tsunami training in that school, and it saved that school. And probably around 800, 900 kids in that school. There was no kids around. They were all on the back of the school heading up the mountain. And thank God those teachers, knew what they were doing.
Education is key, and we must remain vigilant. Even nations as prepared and disciplined as Japan can be impacted by a tsunami with disastrous results. In March 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake struck off the east coast of Japan, creating tsunami waves that produced massive destruction and the loss of more than 16,000 lives in Japan. The tsunami spread across the Pacific, and as you saw at the beginning, even caused serious damage here in Hawaii. Devastating tsunami have struck Hawaii in recorded history, but on a larger time scale, we need to be prepared for much worse. Scientists continue to study past tsunamis in order to gain a better understanding of our current risk. Geologic events such as very large earthquakes are fortunately relatively rare on a human scale, but they are all too common on a larger geologic time scale. The historic record of tsunamis in Hawaii goes back only about 200 years, but scientists have hiked into the deep valleys in Hawaii to take core samples of sediments deposited centuries ago and have found evidence of very large tsunami events. It now appears that larger tsunamis have struck in the past and will someday strike again in the future. We at the museum realize just how important it is to explain the true nature of tsunami waves so that people will better understand their enormous destructive power. But we also realize that it is the true stories of survivors, as told in their own words, that have the power to make people really listen and learn the risks of deadly tsunami waves to avoid becoming victims themselves. To date, the museum has collected more than 600 survivor interviews in what has become the most extensive collection anywhere in the world. We have carried out interviews in 8 different countries and in every U.S. state impacted by past tsunamis. Many of these are being used in other museums from India to Thailand to Valdez, Alaska, and nationwide in exhibits sponsored by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to help educate people about tsunamis. They have also been shown on television on National Geographic Explorer, the Discovery Channel, History Channel, and many more. We've created school curricula about natural hazards for students in grades 4 through high school and conducted training drills at every school in Hawaii located in a tsunami hazard zone. This important work has been funded by various international and U.S. government agencies, nonprofit foundations, and private donors. Our day-to-day operations depend on our small and dedicated staff and the untiring efforts of our hardworking volunteers. By coming here today, you are helping us to continue this vital work. Mahalo nui loa and aloha.
I was in Honolulu and experienced a tsunami warning when I was living at Waikiki with some friends, and we were all surfers at that time. And when they had a tsunami warning, and I look at all my friends and they say, "Get up," and they were taking the surfboard. And I said, so what's going on? They said, we've got a tsunami warning, and we're going out to check out the waves. And they took the surfboard. And so they said, so where you going? I said, I'm taking my surfboard. I'm going up on Diamond Head. I said, you don't want to be down there. If we really have a tidal wave, you won't survive to tell a story. I said, it is very dangerous, and it is not the kind of wave that you should go out there and play with it, because you won't survive.